The crack of gunfire echoed through the darkening sky as Willow Valentine hurried along the dusty main street of Copper Creek, clutching her shawl tightly around her shoulders against the biting autumn wind of 1875. Her heart pounded against her ribs like a frightened rabbit as she cast a nervous glance over her shoulder, praying that Harold wasn't following her this time. "You worthless woman." Harold's final words still rang in her ears as the door slammed behind her, the distinct click of the lock sealing her fate. Willow's trembling fingers touched the bruise blooming beneath her eye. 3 years of marriage to Harold Bennett had taught her that a man's kindness could vanish faster than water on hot desert sand. She'd been a naive 18-year-old when they wed, dazzled by his promises and position as the town's most successful businessman. Now, at 21, she found herself locked out of her own home with nothing but the clothes on her back and a few coins hastily grabbed from the kitchen drawer. The distant saloon music grew louder as Willow neared the heart of Copper Creek. Night was falling fast, and a woman alone after dark invited trouble in a frontier town like this. She needed shelter, but where? Her parents were buried side by side in the small cemetery on the hill. Friends had slowly disappeared as Harold systematically cut her off from everyone she loved. Rain began to fall, fat drops splashing in the dust, quickly turning the street into mud that clung to the hem of her skirt. Willow fought back tears. She wouldn't cry, not again, not after everything. Lightning illuminated the muddy street, revealing a small cabin at the edge of town she'd never noticed before. Smoke curled from its chimney, promising warmth within. Desperation overrode caution as the rain became a downpour. She rushed toward the cabin, her sodden skirts hampering her movements. The porch offered momentary relief from the deluge. Willow hesitated, then knocked on the sturdy wooden door, praying that whoever lived here might offer her shelter, at least until the storm passed. The door swung open, revealing a tall, broad-shouldered man with weather-beaten features and eyes the color of a summer sky. He wasn't from town, she would have remembered him. His expression shifted from surprise to concern as he took in her bedraggled appearance and the darkening bruise on her face. "Please," Willow began, her voice barely audible above the storm. "I need a shout from the street cut her off." Harold's voice slurred with whiskey but unmistakable. "Willow, get back here, woman," she froze, terror paralyzing her as Harold's hulking figure materialized through the rain, his face contorted with rage. "That's my wife," Harold bellowed, pointing an accusatory finger at Willow. "She's coming home with me." The stranger's gaze shifted from Willow to Harold, then back to her frightened face. Something hardened in his expression as he gently but firmly pulled Willow inside and stepped forward, placing himself between her and Harold. "She belongs here," he said, his voice quiet but carrying an unmistakable edge of steel, "not with a man who raises his hand to a woman." Harold's face flushed with anger. "You have no right, I have every right to offer sanctuary to someone in need," the stranger replied evenly. "Go home, mister, sleep it off." "This isn't over," Harold spat, but the stranger's imposing presence and the growing crowd of onlookers seemed to give him pause. With a final venomous glare, he turned and stomped away into the rain. The stranger closed the door and turned to Willow, who stood dripping on his floor, shaking from cold and fear. "My name's Jackson Lawson," he said, his voice gentler now, "and you're safe here, madam, I promise you that." Willow looked up at the tall stranger who just defied her husband without a second thought. No one had stood up for her in years. "I'm Willow," she whispered. "Willow Valentine Bennett, and I don't know how to thank you." Jackson moved to stoke the fire, its warm glow illuminating the simple but comfortable interior of the cabin. "No need for thanks. No decent man would turn away someone in your situation." He gestured toward a rocking chair near the hearth. "Sit by the fire and warm yourself. I'll make some coffee." As Willow sank gratefully into the chair, she noticed the lawman's badge on the table. "You're the new sheriff," Jackson nodded as he set a kettle on the stove. "Arrived last week from Tucson. Seems I've already found trouble or it found me." "Harold has influence in this town," Willow warned, her voice quavering. "His family owns the copper mine and half the businesses. People don't cross him." "Well, I reckon it's about time someone did," Jackson replied, handing her a steaming mug. "Drink this. Then you can tell me what brought you to my door on a night like this." As the warmth of the fire and coffee seeped into her bones, Willow found herself telling this stranger things she'd never spoken aloud to anyone: how Harold's charm had disappeared on their wedding night, replaced by cold control that gradually escalated to violence. How he'd isolated her from friends and family. How tonight wasn't the first time he'd locked her out, but it was the first time she hadn't begged to be let back in. Jackson listened without interrupting, his expression darkening with each revelation. When she finally fell silent, exhausted by the telling, he spoke with quiet conviction. "You can stay here tonight. I'll take the chair. You can have the bed. Tomorrow we'll figure out what comes next." "He won't let me go," Willow whispered, fear clutching at her heart. "Harold doesn't lose." Jackson's eyes met hers steadily. "Everyone loses eventually, Mrs. Bennett, especially men who believe they own people." He hesitated, then added, "I've seen your kind of situation before, my sister." He trailed off, pain flashing across his features. "Let's just say I understand, and I won't send you back to him." That night, as Willow lay in Jackson's bed, listening to the rain on the roof and his steady breathing from the chair by the fire, she felt something unfamiliar: hope, small and fragile as a newly hatched bird, but alive nonetheless. Morning brought clear skies and a knock at the door that sent Willow scrambling for the back room. Jackson motioned for her to stay calm as he checked his revolver and opened the door. Mayor Thomas Blackwell stood on the porch, his jowly face set in a disapproving frown. "Sheriff Lawson, we need to talk about last night's incident." Jackson stepped aside, inviting the mayor in but keeping himself positioned between the visitor and Willow, who had emerged from hiding but remained near the back room door. "Mrs. Bennett," the mayor acknowledged stiffly, "your husband is beside himself with worry. He says there was a misunderstanding." "The only misunderstanding," Jackson interrupted, "was my failure to arrest him for assault. Those bruises tell a clear story, Mayor." Mayor Blackwell shifted uncomfortably. "Harold Bennett is an important man in Copper Creek. He claims his wife had an accident and became hysterical, says she's prone to feminine troubles." Willow flinched at the familiar excuse but found her voice. "Is that what he called this?" She gestured to her face. "And the broken ribs last month, and the time he pushed me down the stairs." The mayor avoided looking directly at her. "These are private matters between husband and wife. Assault isn't private," Jackson cut in, his voice hard. "It's a crime. And as sheriff, I won't ignore it, no matter who's involved." Mayor Blackwell's face reddened. "You're new here, Sheriff. Perhaps you don't understand how things work in Copper Creek. The Bennetts have been the backbone of this town for generations." "Then perhaps it's time for this town to find a new spine," Jackson replied evenly. "Mrs. Bennett is under my protection until this matter is resolved properly." After the mayor left, muttering about outsiders and proper channels, Willow collapsed into a chair. "You shouldn't have done that." "They'll run you out of town." Jackson's smile was grim. "They can try. I didn't take this badge to look the other way while powerful men do as they please." He knelt before her, his expression softening. "I meant what I said. You have my protection for as long as you need it." "Why?" Willow asked, bewildered by this stranger's willingness to risk everything for her. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," he replied simply. "I know you deserve better than fear and pain, and I know that standing by while injustice happens makes a man complicit in it." Over the next few days, Willow gradually emerged from the shell of fear she'd been living in. Jackson arranged for her to stay with Mrs. Garrison, the widow who ran the town's small library. The arrangement provided Willow with safety and respectability while giving the elderly woman much-needed companionship. Harold, meanwhile, alternated between public displays of concern for his troubled wife and thinly veiled threats. He cornered Willow outside the general store one afternoon, his voice honey-sweet but his eyes cold. "You're embarrassing me, Willow. Come home and we'll forget this foolishness." "No, Harold," she replied, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "I'm not coming back." His facade cracked, revealing the familiar rage beneath. "You think that Lawman can protect you. He's temporary, I'm permanent. This is my town. Is everything all right here?" Jackson's voice came from behind them, and Harold stepped back, his mask of concerned husband slipping back into place. Just trying to reason with my wife, Sheriff. A private matter. Harassing Mrs. Bennett in public seems anything but private, Jackson observed mildly. I suggest you continue this conversation through proper legal channels. As Harold stalked away, Willow released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Thank you, again, Jackson shrugged. I was just passing by. But the way his eyes followed Harold suggested he'd been watching more carefully than he let on. The next day, Willow found work at the dressmaker's shop. Mrs. Chen, a Chinese woman who had established herself despite the town's prejudices, recognized Willow's skillful needlework immediately. My husband was like yours, Mrs. Chen confided as they worked. In China, I had no escape. Here, when he raised his hand once too often, I left, built this business myself. Her dark eyes held Willow's. You can build a new life too. For the first time, Willow began to believe it might be possible. Jackson visited often, initially under the pretense of ensuring her safety, then increasingly without excuses. They would talk for hours about books, about his travels, about her dreams of someday having her own dress shop. He never pushed her to speak of Harold, but listened attentively when she chose to share the darker parts of her past. You know, he said one evening as they walked back from Mrs. Garrison's garden, you're the strongest person I've met in this town. Willow laughed in disbelief. Me. I'm the woman who stayed with a monster for 3 years. And you're the woman who finally walked away, he countered. That takes more courage than facing down a gunslinger. Something warm unfurled in Willow's chest at his words, not just gratitude, but something deeper and more dangerous. She couldn't afford such feelings, not when her future remained so uncertain. The reckoning came sooner than expected. Harold filed a petition claiming Willow was mentally unstable and needed to be returned to his care for her own protection. The town judge, a longtime associate of the Bennett family, seemed inclined to grant the petition without much consideration. We need to fight this properly, Jackson insisted when Willow suggested fleeing town. Running makes you look guilty of something. What can we do? Harold owns the judge, the mayor, half the town council. He doesn't own everyone, Jackson replied, and he doesn't own the truth. Together they gathered testimony from Dr. Parker, who had treated Willow's accidents over the years, from neighbors who had heard her screams, from the maid who had seen Harold's violence firsthand. Most were reluctant at first, fearful of Bennett reprisals, but Jackson's unwavering determination gradually won them over. The hearing became the most talked-about event in Copper Creek's recent history. The courthouse overflowed with spectators, many standing outside to hear what they could through open windows. Harold's lawyer painted Willow as unstable, ungrateful, and influenced by the new sheriff who clearly had improper designs on a married woman. Witnesses for Harold testified to his generosity, his standing in the community, his apparent devotion to his wife. When Willow's turn came to speak, she approached the front of the courtroom, conscious of every eye upon her. Her hands trembled, but her voice remained steady as she recounted 3 years of escalating abuse, of isolation and terror. I stayed because I was afraid, she concluded. Afraid of him, yes, but more afraid of not being believed, of having nowhere to go. Sheriff Lawson gave me the courage to speak the truth, to believe I deserved better. I'm not asking for anything but my freedom. The judge, visibly uncomfortable, called for a recess. During the break, Jackson found Willow in a side room, her composure finally cracking. What if it's not enough? She whispered. What if he makes me go back? Jackson took her hands in his. That won't happen. I won't let it happen. His blue eyes held a fierce protectiveness that made her breath catch. Whatever comes next, you're not alone anymore, Willow. When the judge returned, his decision was unexpected. He granted Willow a legal separation, not the divorce she had hoped for, but freedom from Harold's control and protection from being forced to return to him. Given the evidence presented, the judge stated, looking pointedly at Harold, I cannot in good conscience return Mrs. Bennett to a potentially dangerous situation. Furthermore, I am referring this matter to the circuit court for consideration of more permanent arrangements. Harold's face contorted with rage. "This is outrageous. She's my wife." "She's a person," the judge replied, revealing a backbone few knew he possessed. "Not property. This court is adjourned." The victory was sweet but precarious. Everyone knew Harold Bennett wasn't a man to accept defeat gracefully. The warning came from an unexpected source, Harold's own cousin, who approached Jackson after the hearing. "He's hiring men," the young man whispered. "Gunmen from over Tucson Way. Says he's going to clean up the town starting with you." Jackson thanked him for the warning. "When are they due to arrive?" 2 days, maybe 3. "Be careful, Sheriff. These aren't local troublemakers, they're killers." Willow was horrified when Jackson told her. "This is because of me. You have to leave town before they come." "That's not how this works," Jackson replied calmly, checking his revolver. "I took an oath to protect this town. Besides, running from bullies just encourages them." "This isn't some saloon brawl," Willow protested. "These are professional gunmen, and they're coming for you because you helped me." Jackson's expression softened. "I helped you because it was right, and I'm staying for the same reason." He hesitated, then added quietly, "and because there are things worth fighting for here." "People worth fighting for?" The look in his eyes sent warmth flooding through her, followed immediately by ice-cold fear. She couldn't bear to be the cause of his death. That night, Willow made her decision. She packed her few belongings and left a note for Mrs. Garrison, explaining that she was leaving to protect those who had helped her. She slipped out before dawn, intending to catch the early stage to Silver City, where she had a distant cousin. She never made it to the stage. Harold's men intercepted her at the edge of town, dragging her struggling form to Bennett's warehouse by the mine. Harold's smile was triumphant as she was pushed into a chair before him. "Did you really think I'd let you humiliate me like that? That I'd let some drifter with a badge take what's mine?" "I'm not yours," Willow said, finding courage in her anger. "I never really was." Harold's hand cracked across her face. "You're whatever I say you are, and after today, you'll be the grieving widow of our tragically murdered sheriff." He nodded to his men. "Once Lawson realizes she's missing, he'll come looking. When he does, kill him. Make it look like a robbery gone wrong." Willow lunged at Harold but was roughly restrained. "He'll know it's a trap, perhaps, but he'll come anyway." Harold stroked her cheek, making her skin crawl. "That's the thing about heroic men, my dear. They're so predictably self-sacrificing." Hours passed in tense silence. Willow tested her bonds repeatedly but found no weakness. She could hear Harold's men playing cards in the next room, occasionally arguing over who would get the privilege of killing the sheriff. The warehouse door creaked open. Willow's heart sank as Jackson's voice called out, "Bennett, I know you have Mrs. Bennett. Let's talk about this like civilized men." Harold signaled his men, who moved to positions on either side of the door. "In here, Sheriff, unarmed if you please. My men are rather jumpy." "Jackson, it's a trap," Willow shouted, earning another slap from Harold. "I figured as much," Jackson replied, his voice closer now. "That's why I brought friends." Gunfire erupted outside, followed by shouts and confusion. Harold's face contorted with rage as he grabbed Willow, pressing a pistol to her temple. "Call them off, Sheriff, or she dies right now." "That would be unwise," Jackson said, suddenly in the doorway with his revolver trained on Harold. 2 of the town's deputies appeared behind him, their weapons covering the hired guns, who wisely raised their hands. Harold's arm tightened around Willow's throat. "Back off, I'll kill her." "No, you won't," Jackson replied, his voice deadly calm. "Because you know if you do, you'll be dead before she hits the floor. It's over, Bennett, let her go." For a terrible moment, Willow felt Harold's grip tighten, the gun barrel pressing harder against her skin. Then abruptly, he shoved her forward and raised his hands. "This isn't over," he snarled as the deputies moved to handcuff him. "Yes," Jackson said, helping Willow to her feet, "it is." The following weeks brought sweeping changes to Copper Creek. Harold Bennett was charged with kidnapping, attempted murder, and a host of other crimes. His business interests were placed in receivership, and many of his corrupt allies in town government resigned rather than face investigation. For Willow, the changes were even more profound. The circuit judge granted her divorce, virtually unheard of except in the most extreme circumstances. She moved into a small apartment above Mrs. Chen's shop and threw herself into building a new life, free from Harold's shadow. Jackson remained a constant presence, though he maintained a careful distance that both frustrated and relieved Willow. She wasn't ready for anything beyond friendship, and he seemed to understand that without being told. "You saved my life," she said one evening as they sat on Mrs. Garrison's porch, watching fireflies dance in the gathering dusk. "I never properly thanked you." "You saved your own life when you walked away from him," Jackson replied. "I just helped with the logistics." Willow laughed, the sound still somewhat unfamiliar but increasingly frequent. "Is that what you call getting shot at by hired gunmen? Logistics?" He grinned, the expression transforming his usually serious face. "Part of the job description." Must be willing to face down murderous husbands and their hired thugs. It was in the fine print. Their eyes met, and something electric passed between them. Jackson cleared his throat and looked away first. "I should probably head back to the office. Early start tomorrow." Willow watched him go, conflicted feelings churning inside her. She was drawn to him in ways that both thrilled and terrified her. After Harold, she had sworn never to give another man power over her heart, yet Jackson had slipped past her defenses without even trying. Summer faded into autumn, and Copper Creek settled into a new normal. Harold's trial was moved to the territorial capital, where he was convicted and sentenced to 15 years in prison. The Bennett mining interests were purchased by a company from San Francisco, bringing new investment and opportunity to the town. Willow's skill with a needle brought increasing business to Mrs. Chen's shop, and they formed a partnership that allowed Willow to open a small millinery section featuring her hat designs. For the first time in her life, she was truly independent, with money of her own and decisions that were hers alone to make. Jackson remained sheriff, turning down an offer to run for mayor. "I'm better with outlaws than ordinances," he told Willow with a wry smile. They continued their careful friendship, sharing meals and conversations, but never addressing the growing tension between them. The Harvest Festival in October marked a turning point. The town square was decorated with autumn leaves and pumpkins. Musicians played lively tunes, and tables groaned under the weight of food brought by every household. Willow, wearing a new dress of russet brown that she'd made herself, found herself swept into a Virginia reel by Jackson, who proved surprisingly light on his feet for such a tall man. "Where did a lawman learn to dance like this?" she asked, breathless, as they circled each other. "My mother insisted all her sons learn proper social graces," he replied. "Said a man who could dance would never lack for female company." "She was a wise woman," Willow laughed, then sobered. "You never talk about your family, not much to tell." "Parents gone, brothers scattered to the four winds, my sister." His expression darkened. "She married young to a man who seemed kind. By the time we realized he wasn't, it was too late. The music ended and they stepped away from the dancing area." "Is that why you helped me?" Willow asked quietly. "Because of your sister." Jackson was silent for a long moment. "Partly," he finally admitted. "I couldn't save her, but it's more than that." His blue eyes met hers, serious now. "From the moment you appeared on my doorstep, something about you." He trailed off, looking uncomfortable. Willow's heart quickened. "Something about me what?" "Felt like home," he finished simply. "I know that sounds foolish." "It doesn't," she whispered. They stood together in silence, the festival continuing around them but somehow separate from them, as if they existed in a bubble of their own making. "Willow," Jackson began, then stopped as Mayor Blackwell approached with a visiting dignitary in tow. The moment shattered, but something had changed. As the evening progressed, Willow found herself increasingly aware of Jackson's presence, the sound of his laugh, the way his eyes sought hers across the crowd, the brush of his hand against hers as he passed her a cup of cider. When he offered to walk her home, the air between them fairly crackled with unspoken words. They reached Mrs. Chen's shop too quickly, pausing at the side entrance that led to Willow's apartment. "Thank you for the dance," Willow said, suddenly shy, "and the escort home." "My pleasure," Jackson replied, making no move to leave. "Willow, about what I said earlier. About feeling like home," her voice was barely above a whisper. He nodded, stepping closer. "I've never said anything like that to anyone before. I'm not sure what it means exactly." I think I do, Willow said, gathering her courage. It means that sometimes people recognize each other even when they've just met, like they were supposed to find each other. Jackson's hand gently cupped her cheek, his touch so different from Harold's warm, reverent, asking rather than taking. May I kiss you, Willow Valentine? Her answer was to rise on tiptoe, closing the distance between them. His lips met hers tentatively at first, then with growing certainty as she responded. It was nothing like Harold's demanding kisses. This was a conversation, an exchange, a mutual discovery. When they finally parted, Willow kept her eyes closed for a moment, savoring the feeling. That was a beginning, Jackson finished for her, his smile evident in his voice. Over the following months, their courtship progressed with deliberate care. Jackson never pushed, understanding Willow's need to move slowly, to be certain of her own feelings rather than being swept away. They took walks by the creek, shared meals at the hotel restaurant, and spent countless hours in conversation. Willow found herself falling in love with Jackson's quiet strength, his unwavering integrity, and the gentleness that belied his imposing physical presence. He treated her as an equal, valuing her opinions and encouraging her growing business acumen as she expanded her millinery into a full-fledged dress shop. For his part, Jackson seemed continually amazed by Willow's resilience, her capacity for joy despite everything she'd endured, and her determination to build a life on her own terms. He found excuses to visit her shop, sometimes bringing wildflowers or interesting stones he'd found on his patrols. "You're courting me properly," Willow observed one evening as they sat by the creek, watching the sunset paint the water gold and crimson. "No one ever courted me before. Harold just decided I was his." Jackson's arm tightened around her shoulders. "You deserve to be courted. To be given the time and space to decide what you want." "I know what I want," she said softly, turning to face him. "I've known for some time now." His eyes darkened. "Willow, I don't want to rush you. After everything you've been through, you're not rushing me," she interrupted. "You're the most patient man I've ever known. But at some point patience becomes unnecessary." The kiss that followed left them both breathless. "Are you sure?" Jackson asked, his voice rough with emotion. "I've never been more sure of anything," Willow replied. "I love you, Jackson Lawson." His smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "I love you too, Willow Valentine, more than I have words to express." They were married in the spring of 1876, a simple ceremony in the town's small church with Mrs. Chen, Mrs. Garrison, and half the townspeople in attendance. Willow wore a gown of ivory silk that she had made herself, with tiny seed pearls sewn into the bodice. Jackson looked uncharacteristically nervous in his new suit, his usually steady hands fumbling with the ring until the pastor gently guided him. Their vows were traditional, but spoken with such evident sincerity that Mrs. Garrison was seen dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, Jackson's kiss was both tender and promising, making several of the older ladies fan themselves vigorously. The reception at the hotel was a joyous affair, with music, dancing, and enough food to feed the entire county. Mayor Blackwell gave a slightly pompous toast, followed by a more heartfelt one from Mrs. Chen, who raised her glass to two souls who found each other against all odds. As the celebration continued around them, Jackson led Willow onto the balcony for a moment of quiet. The spring night was warm, stars scattered like diamonds across the velvet sky. "Happy, Mrs. Lawson?" he asked, his arms encircling her waist from behind as she gazed up at the constellations. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Willow replied, leaning back against his chest, "though I must admit the name still sounds strange to my ears." "We have a lifetime for you to get used to it," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Speaking of which, I have something for you." He produced a small package from his pocket. Willow unwrapped it to find a key attached to a small silver charm in the shape of a house. "What's this?" she asked, turning it over in her hand. "The key to our new home," Jackson replied. "I bought the Henderson place last month. It needs some work, but it has a good-sized room that would make a perfect workshop for your dressmaking." Tears welled in Willow's eyes. "You thought of my work. Of course, it's part of who you are." His expression grew serious. "I never want you to feel trapped or dependent, Willow." Whatever we build together should make both of us more ourselves, not less. She turned in his arms, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. Take me home, Jackson. Take me home now. They slipped away from the reception, ignoring the knowing smiles and good-natured teasing. Jackson had arranged for their belongings to be moved earlier in the day, so the house was ready for them, a fire already laid in the hearth against the spring evening's chill. The Henderson place was larger than Jackson's cabin, but still modest, a main room with a stone fireplace, a kitchen with a cast iron stove, 2 bedrooms, and the promised workshop space with large windows that would provide excellent light for Willow's detailed work. It's perfect, she breathed, turning in a slow circle to take it all in. Absolutely perfect. Jackson watched her with a mixture of pride and something deeper, more primal. There's one more thing, he said, leading her to the main bedroom. On the bed lay a package wrapped in brown paper. Willow opened it to find a handcrafted wooden sign, the letters burned into the smooth surface. Valentine and Lawson Fine Apparel. For your shop, Jackson explained. I thought maybe you could expand beyond dresses and hats, perhaps add men's tailoring eventually. Make it a true partnership with Mrs. Chen. Willow traced the lettering with her fingertips, touched beyond words by his belief in her dreams. How do you always know exactly what I need before I even say it? Not always, he admitted, drawing her close. But I'm committed to spending the rest of my life trying to figure it out. Their first kiss as husband and wife in their own home was tender, full of promise and shared dreams. The second was more urgent, years of careful restraint finally giving way to the desire they'd both held in check for so long. Willow had feared this moment, worried that intimacy would bring back memories of Harold's demanding, selfish attentions. But Jackson's touch erased all thoughts of the past. His reverent exploration of her body healing wounds she hadn't realized still ached. For the first time, she understood that physical love could be a conversation rather than a conquest, a mutual journey of discovery rather than a taking. Afterward, as they lay tangled in each other's arms, Willow traced the scar on Jackson's shoulder, a souvenir from a gunfight years ago, he'd told her. I never thought I could feel this way, she confessed. Safe and free at the same time. Jackson kissed her forehead. That's what love should be. Safety that liberates rather than confines. They drifted to sleep in their new home, the first of many nights they would spend wrapped in each other's arms, building a life neither had dared hope for. The years that followed brought challenges and joys in equal measure. Willow's business flourished, especially after she added a line of men's clothing that quickly became popular among the town's more fashion-conscious citizens. Jackson continued as sheriff, his fair-handed approach to justice gradually transforming Copper Creek from a rough mining town to a place where families could thrive. In the spring of 1877, their first child was born, a daughter they named Eleanor, after Jackson's sister. Willow discovered that motherhood, like marriage to Jackson, was nothing like she had feared. Eleanor was a joy, her arrival deepening the bond between them in ways they hadn't anticipated. She has your eyes, Jackson whispered the first time he held his daughter, his voice choked with emotion. And hopefully your good sense. And your stubborn streak, Willow teased, exhausted but radiant. She certainly took her time arriving. Jackson's expression grew serious. Thank you for our daughter, for our family, for everything. Willow reached for his hand. We built this together, remember? That was our promise. As Eleanor grew from infant to toddler to a spirited young girl, the Lawson household expanded again with the arrival of twins James and Joseph in 1880. Their home, once so new and empty, became filled with children's laughter, scattered toys, and the organized chaos of family life. Willow continued her work, though on a reduced schedule, often with Eleanor helping by sorting buttons or Joseph sleeping in a basket beside her workbench. Jackson became a devoted father, reading stories at bedtime and teaching the children to ride almost as soon as they could walk. News reached them in 1884 that Harold Bennett had died in prison during an outbreak of tuberculosis. Willow received the information with a strange sense of detachment, as if hearing about a stranger rather than the man who had once dominated her life. Are you all right? Jackson asked that evening after the children were asleep. Willow considered the question carefully. Yes, she finally said. I feel nothing, really. He has no power over me anymore. Hasn't for a long time. Jackson nodded, understanding without need for further explanation. It was one of the things she loved most about him, his ability to hear what she meant beyond the words she said. As their children grew, so did Copper Creek. The railroad arrived in 1885, bringing new opportunities and challenges. Willow's business expanded to include ready-made clothing imported from Eastern manufacturers, while still offering custom work for those who could afford it. Jackson, approaching his 50th birthday, began training a deputy to eventually take over as sheriff. I'm getting too old to be chasing outlaws across the territory, he admitted one night as Willow rubbed liniment into his aching shoulder, the old wound bothering him more as the years passed. You could run for mayor, Willow suggested. Blackwell is retiring next year, Jackson laughed. Politics, me, I'd rather face a dozen gunmen. The town respects you, they'd listen to your ideas for improving things. He considered this, looking around their comfortable home, then out the window to the town that had changed so much during their time there. Maybe if you'll be my campaign manager. I thought you'd never ask, Willow replied with a smile. The mayoral campaign of 1886 was surprisingly spirited, with Jackson facing opposition from the owner of the new hotel who wanted to transform Copper Creek into a destination for wealthy Easterners seeking Western adventures. The debates were lively, with Willow often contributing ideas that became central to Jackson's platform: improved schools, better roads, and a proper hospital. Election day arrived with clear skies and high turnout. The Lawson children, now aged 9 and 6, distributed campaign ribbons Willow had designed. By evening, the results were clear. Jackson Lawson would be the next mayor of Copper Creek. Mayor Lawson, Willow teased as they celebrated privately after the public festivities. It has a certain ring to it. I couldn't have done it without you, Jackson said, pulling her close. Any of it. You know that, right? We did it together, she corrected gently. That's our story. Their story continued to unfold over the decades that followed. Eleanor grew up to become a teacher, her mother's determination and her father's sense of justice making her a formidable advocate for education in the territory. The twins followed different paths: James to law school in Denver, Joseph to medical school in San Francisco, but both returned to Arizona, contributing to the growing state's development. Jackson served 3 terms as mayor before retiring to focus on his true passion: working with troubled young men, teaching them ranching skills, and offering them alternatives to the paths that often led to jail or early graves. Willow sold her business to a former apprentice, but continued to create special pieces for family and close friends, her skill with needle and thread undiminished by time. They celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary in 1916, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and a lifetime of friends. The world had changed dramatically. Automobiles now shared the streets with horses. Electric lights illuminated homes that once relied on candles and oil lamps, and the Great War raged in Europe. Yet some things remained constant. The way Jackson still looked at Willow as if seeing her for the first time, the way her hand automatically sought his in moments of joy or concern, the deep, abiding love that had only grown stronger through challenges and triumphs shared. If I had to do it all over again, Jackson said that night as they sat on the porch of the home they'd shared for 4 decades, I wouldn't change a thing. Willow squeezed his hand, thinking of that rainy night so long ago when a desperate woman had knocked on a stranger's door. Not even the gunfights. Well, maybe those, he admitted with a chuckle, but not the outcome, never the outcome. As twilight deepened into night, stars appearing one by one in the vast Arizona sky, Willow leaned her head against her husband's shoulder, content in the knowledge that sometimes the most unlikely beginnings could lead to the most beautiful stories. She belongs here, Jackson had said on that fateful night, not knowing how prophetic those words would prove to be. Here in this town, here in this life they had built together, here in his heart as he was in hers now and always.